My mom died a little over 20 years ago. And when she died from cancer, she was living with me. I was taking care of her. And so when she passed away, I had to take care of that too, closing out her life. And I am a very organized, anal person, and my mom had just died and I needed a distraction. So I decided to get all the paperwork done right away, like the day after she died. And I was good. I made a list and I started making phone calls, informing everyone who needed to know that she had passed away. And pretty much everyone who I talked to said, "Oh, we're so sorry for your loss. You don't need to do this right now. Here's what you need to do eventually, but take your time." You know, they acted human. Until I got to the phone call where I called the person from the disability insurance. And when I said to her, my mom died, she no longer needs to receive disability, the woman said, "Well, when did she die?" And I said, "Yesterday." And she said, "Yesterday, September 29th? And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, she didn't live through the end of the month." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And she said, "Well, she didn't live through the end of the month, so you don't get paid for September, so don't be expecting a check." And I did not have I did not have a response ready for that kind of statement. So I think I might have even just said thank you and courteously gotten off the phone with the woman. And I gotta say, there were a lot of horrible things that I still think about when I think about my mom dying. But that phone call stands out as one of the most horrible. And it's not because the woman was rude, because like many of you, I am from New Jersey. I can handle rude, but it was the way she was rude. It was triggering for me then and ever since, because I had had many years of living with the indignity of being poor. When I was 8 or 9, we were pretty comfortable. My dad was the vice president of a bank. And, you know, even though my parents were divorced, he paid for his own apartment and he paid for the house that me and my mom and brother and sister all lived in. It wasn't luxurious. It was a ranch-style home. There were 3 bedrooms I had to share with my sister, but we were doing okay. We were fine. And then the savings and loan crisis happened. If you don't know, it was in the late 1980s. It lasted a few years. A whole bunch of banks went under. And I was 8 or 9 at the time. I don't know the details from living through them, but from reading about them, I know that those people who owned those banks, those board members, those CEOs, they were taken care of. They were fine. But the people who worked at the bank, people like my dad, they didn't fare so well. My dad had invested all of his savings, all of his stock, all of his retirement, and he lost every penny the same day he lost his job. So he went and he looked for another job, and he got another job at another bank, and that bank went under. And then he went and he looked for another job, and he got another job at another bank, and that bank went under. And eventually he ended up working at the Home Depot. And we went from being middle class to lower class overnight. My mom, who hadn't worked for 13 years because she was raising kids, she had to go and find a job. And ironically, she got one working as a bookkeeper at a local bank. But we were barely scraping by. And for me, as a kid, I saw the change in the way people treated us. I mean, at school, I went from being someone who could buy clothes at the mall to someone who was buying clothes at the thrift store. Kids are not nice at that age. And when we go to the doctor's office, the people at the front desk treated us different. I didn't understand it at the time. I think I know better now, but we did not get treated like we used to, you know, like respectable citizens. And then the worst for me was always going to the grocery store. It was so embarrassing. I was so ashamed because every time we'd get in the checkout line, My mom would pull out her wallet and she'd pull out her coupon book with the stamps in it to pay for things. And I was sure everyone knew. And the worst part was that my mom would always go in line, the line that my elementary school science teacher was working at. Because back then they didn't pay teachers very well. So he was doing double duty as a cashier. And I was always so upset that she went in his line because then he knew that we were on food stamps. And for me, it was so embarrassing because he was there when my mom took out the coupon book, and he was there when my mom had to say, no, we can't get that. We can't afford that. But in retrospect, I think the reason she went to his line is because they knew each other. And they commiserated. And maybe sometimes when I was crying about something that I really wanted that we couldn't afford, maybe that thing made it into our shopping bag, even if we couldn't afford it, thanks to him. But the whole time, the feeling that I remember the most was feeling ashamed. But we made it, we scraped by, we were surviving. And then when I was in high school, my mom had a stroke. She lost the ability to read and to write and to do math and to work. And again, I was young. I didn't know how things worked, but those people sent people to our house to talk to my mom, to interview her. What I later realized was to investigate her, to make sure she wasn't lying about all those side effects, to make sure she wasn't just being lazy so that she could collect that large government handout. Well, she wasn't lying. She passed the test. She couldn't work. And so starting when I was 16 years old, we began receiving Social Security and disability for the grand sum total of $1,100 a month. And I gotta say, that was not enough to live on. But with that, and with food stamps, and with my sister working and me working, we scraped by. We made it. And furthermore, by the time I had to make that phone call to that woman to tell her that my mom had died, I was doing okay. I had done everything the way you are supposed to. I had lifted myself up by my bootstraps. I was middle class again. I was doing okay. I didn't even need that $400 check that I wasn't going to get because my mom hadn't made it one more day. But that moment stood the test of time because, again, I was filled with this shame. I could hear it in the woman's voice. You don't deserve this. But I kept going, I kept working, I did pretty well. It was a little shaky in 2008. I almost lost my house with a lot of other people when that whole Big Short thing happened. But a little bit after that, I met my husband, and we got married, and he was doing it right too. Another guy who grew up poor. He knew you have to work hard, you got to pay your taxes, you got to do it right, and then you're going to be okay. And he had a stable job. He's a government contractor. He's been a government contractor for over 20 years, so we were doing just great. We had kids, we're living a middle-class life in a single-family home, we got a dog. And yet, here we are again. Here we are again, not knowing what is going to happen next month or the month after or how we are going to get through this. And again, there is this sense of, what did I do to deserve this? How did I end up here? But this time, I don't know if there's going to be food stamps. And I don't know if there's going to be a safety net if I need it, if my kids need it. I don't know if it's going to be there. And thinking about that and about the people who are holding that and keeping it from my family, it has made me realize something. I don't deserve this. It's not my fault. I didn't do this to myself. My dad didn't do it to himself. My mom didn't do it to herself. None of us did it to ourselves in 2008. You know what? There are some people who did it, and those people are not facing the consequences right now. And they didn't in 2008, and they didn't in the late 80s, and they haven't ever. And that is why they are okay if we don't get our safety net. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what we're supposed to do, but the revelation that I had that is not my fault has made me think that maybe if we, all of us, can just agree on that one simple idea. Because you know what? There are a heck of a lot more of us than there are of them. So if we can all just agree that we all, as human beings, deserve respect and basic human decency, then maybe we can stand together, united, and tell those people, that 1%, tell them what we want. Tell them what we need. And demand that they treat us like human beings. And maybe then we can change and make them face the same consequences that they caused that we are all facing now. Thank you.